Hello and welcome to the OMO Podcast. I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
And I'm Dunigan.
And we're getting all... This is kind of weird. It's like there's this time period we're at right now where it feels just like the late 90s, early 2000s is all kind of coming back to us. Sounds like that Boomerang thing, like where it's like, it's all coming back to you.
Was that the old catchphrase for the Boomerang Network?
Yeah, it sort of was, which it felt like it's for like an old person. Like, it's kind of like, remember that boomerang you threw out your window when you were 10 years old? And you never saw it ever again? Guess what? 30 years later, it's coming back to you. It's coming right for your fucking face.
Just smacks some baby in the side of it. It's like, oh, the Flintstones.
Oh, I remember that. Sort of. But it's just that weird thing where it's like, okay, we have both a Resident Evil 3 remake and a Final Fantasy 7 remake right at the same time, which to me it's like one of those ones like that both those games were like such a big deal for like the late 90s into early 2000s, you know, and it's just like that was like a huge, you know, those are games that like this day and age I still play them like almost about at least once a year. Both the old games, you know, and then let alone now you got these remakes and so on, and like the Resident Evil 3 one, that's been like one of the best games I've played in so long. Like, that's the best Resident Evil game I've played since Resident Evil 5. And I love fucking Resident Evil 5, but it's just like, I put the amount of time in that game like it's a fucking RPG. And it's not. It's a kind of even a short game, too. But, like, it's just so dialed in perfect. And, I mean, I know, who knows about the Final Fantasy 7 remake? That's like, that'll be our thing coming up. That's why we're doing this Final Fantasy movie. But yeah, it's this weird, like, let's go back in time to the good old days, you know, to the days, you know, it's like, I guess like what anybody does, like, you know, like your happy days. Our happy days is, you know, sitting around with a GameCube and a PS2, I guess.
Well, I guess that if we didn't already do Final Fantasy Advent Children, maybe like only like 2 or 3 years back, we'd probably be reviewing that right now. But like, all right, well, chances are right now without going into too much detail, my PS4 is low on memory, so I gotta go buy a new hard drive before I can even play Final Fantasy VII with lockdown and all that shit. It's kind of hard to get all that. Because I'm not gonna lie, I don't like downloading. I like having the physical copy. And compiled with that, it was also like, all right, well, what can we do that's Final Fantasy oriented in honor of Final Fantasy VII Remake? We're like, well, I guess we could do the Final Fantasy Spirits Within movie. And the thing about that is, I'm not going to try and be a dick throughout this. That's usually when I'm a dick on the show when I say that. But
yeah,
it's one of those things. Like I'm preemptively letting you know before I kick it in the balls. So, it's one of those things where usually on the show we like to talk about things we're really big fans of, and if we can't talk about things we're big fans of, we're talking about things that are just at least interesting, like how it got made, how it happened. Not trying to be that totally cynical, like cinema sins, like sin number 435. This camera angle has a weird zoom on it, you know, some shit like that, you know, or like weird, or you know, like honest trailers, no bullshit like that, but just really analyze this movie, because even if I may not like the movie, it's interesting at least the way how it got made.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about Spirits Within. You know, it's one of those ones like, it's a movie that's like a humongous fucking historical film that's almost kind of forgotten. Like, you know, and it's not saying that it has to be like the greatest movie ever for it to be that, but like for that movie just coming out is just one of those ones like, if you were there in fucking 2001, like this was a big fucking deal movie, you know? And I think it was also too because it's kind of like, this is sort of the second wave of video game movies, you know? The first wave you have is with Mario Brothers and Street Fighter and Double Dragon and so on. And, you know, Mortal Kombat and what have you. But then, like, the second wave, because there's almost like a little bit of a period where there isn't really anything out for a handful of years. The next big wave, though, was when, you know, Tomb Raider came out just right before this. And, you know, that was just such a big one because you're like, oh, fuck, they're speaking to me, the fucking video game person, they're finally bringing it back. You know, so you have this Tomb Raider movie, and the Tomb Raider movie's fantastic, too, of Angelina Jolie. That's always a fun one. Like, I don't care what anybody says. You know, and then the next big one was just like a month later, they're going to do a fucking Final Fantasy movie. You know, it is, you know, as a kid, that was about, you know, the late 90s is right when I got that, like, hard into Final Fantasy. You know, it's like you just kind of started going through them all. You know what I mean? You picked up the ones you missed, you grabbed the new ones at the time, and so on. And it was like you lived and died by the fucking Final Fantasy Gunblade.
I remember I actually saw this movie in theaters. When I first saw it, I liked it, but it's one of those movies I just saw it over the years and didn't really hold up, and not like, oh my god, it's so awful. I just didn't really like it that much. But when I first saw it, I remember I was in Hawaii with my family on vacation, and they all wanted to go and go to this restaurant where, I don't know, it was like this buffet. It wasn't like a luau, but it was some kind of restaurant buffet thing. It would be taken forever, and I really wasn't that hungry by that point, so I was just like, I already ate. On the other side of the shopping mall is a movie theater. Can I go see this Final Fantasy movie? Or like, it's gonna get him out of here for like 2 hours. We can get fucked up. Yeah, go ahead, go, have fun. Here you go. Here's $10. So, and I remember like just being, oh, cool. Like the first time seeing going to a movie theater totally by myself. I was probably like 11 or something, or 12 maybe, and going into that movie. Or maybe I was like 13 or whatever. But anyway, going to that movie and then getting in there, and this is like opening, like second week the movie's out probably. Not a soul in the movie theater.
Shit.
Totally by myself.
And you're literally where the movie is made at.
Yeah. So I literally, and then I put like, I was just like, oh my God. And I just, remember stretching out, putting my arms on the chair, like putting my arms on both chairs next to me, feet up like on the other chair, like you're not supposed to do if someone's in front of you. Like,
you're like, I'm a fucking adult. I own a movie theater.
Regardless of how I feel now about the movie, I'll say at that point in my life, that was one of the best movie experiences I ever had.
I'll say this too. Speaking of kind of vacation, did your parents ever have the thing where it's just kind of like, like whenever you like are on vacation and then you sort of bring up either like movies or like video games, it's almost like, well, you're on vacation, you should kind of experience like, where you're at. You can always go see a movie or you can always play a video game when you're at home. And it's kind of like that thing. It's like, yeah, but this movie just came out. You know what I mean? Like, I'll kid you. I don't care where I am on, vacation in the world. It's probably not going to be nearly as interesting as whatever this movie that I'm looking real forward to that just came out is. Just saying. I'm going to be realistic right here.
I think it depends on where I'm at, how long I've been there, and what the movie is. Mm-hmm. This point, for now, if I was to go see a movie in theaters while I'm in another town or actually on vacation, like not like another town, like, oh, I'm just a few, I'm just like a few blocks, like a few counties over, nothing like that. But if I'm like, say I'm in like something like Hawaii or somewhere interesting like that, probably I would not really go see a movie unless it was like the next Quentin Tarantino movie or the next Batman movie or Edgar Wright movie, something kind of like that.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not just talking about like any movie. I'm talking about something you are looking really forward to. Like,
and I guess
something that would outrule whatever else you want to do in life.
I guess by that point, I wasn't the world's biggest Final Fantasy fan because I didn't have a PlayStation 1. All I had was all I had, like not like that, but I'm like, this is back in the day where you had one or the other. Most kids, if there's a kid who had 2 or 3 systems, that was the rich kid.
Yeah.
I just had the 64. So I kind of knew of Final Fantasy, and Final Fantasy VII at that time was a game I wanted to play and heard nothing but good things about. So, and I had a friend, the guy who kind of got me into anime was a big Final Fantasy fan, so I was kind of curious about Final Fantasy, and I knew of like certain plot points and things about it. So I was interested in the movie, just by in fact it was a video game movie. That in itself made me want to see it. When you're younger, I guess it's still kind of there, but a lot of times like, oh, it's a video game movie. That means I got to support the cause.
Yeah, I still feel like that. Like, I still go to those kind of movies, be like, well, if it's a video game movie, you can't let this down. We haven't really got there yet where these movies are fucking just rolling. It's because kind of like a Marvel movie. You could pretty much never go see another Marvel movie again. They're still going to keep making them. They don't really need your support anymore. But a video game movie, I still always feel it's kind of like, it's like voting. It's easy to go like, well, my vote doesn't count, but it's like, well, every fucking ticket to a video game movie makes a difference.
Well, I'll say that whatchamacallit, I've kind of fallen less away from that, depending if it's something I like. Like, I'm not going to go see Angry Birds 2 or the second Hitman movie in theaters. Like, well, it is based on a video game. No, not to that point. But when I was younger, that was definitely like, all right, well, even though I never played this game, I want to see I want more of a video game movie, so here we go. And then, like you said, we're still kind of waiting on that point from the roll, with Sonic the Hedgehog being like the most financially successful video game movie, and not getting amazing reviews, but getting decent reviews. That in itself is a big step towards that. Same thing with Detective Pikachu. So with both those happening, I think they re-optioned a Mega Man movie. So we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, so we might be in like almost like you could say like the third wave of video game films. I mean, I know they've
Kind of like that Blade, kind of like the first like Blade of video game movies. Like you look back on it now, it's still a good movie, but there's some things that are a little like, oh well, that's not like the comics, but you know what? It came out when it did, so we're just gonna accept it. Or like X-Men, kind of.
yeah, and it makes the start and so on, and that's sort of like how Spirits Within is too. It's like one of those movies where it's such like a starting film because in a sense it's like this was like that first big movie because it really kind of blows you away to think that this went to theaters. You know what I mean? Because when you sort of look at it now, it's like movies like this never even would go close to theaters. Maybe unless you're like in Japan or something like that, they just go straight. Animated movies are such a hard one to put in the theaters anymore. But just the fact that here's this movie that they thought that like, you know what, it's gonna go to theaters. We're gonna make a big deal out of it. And also it just being like it's a CG movie and like all the characters are CG in it because really before it's like what else did you have that was all CG, like a Pixar movie or something like that, like a like a cartoon. It's like, well, here's like a movie but it's all in CG. And I mean there is some like anime ones you can find like in the 90s that are like 90 CG, which those are always fun in themselves. Or like I guess it's not a two theaters movie, but there's like the Mortal Kombat like CG like movie or show, whatever that was.
Well, you have like also like I feel like this feels more like it's in the vein of, say, kind of like that Appleseed reboot that came out in the early 2000s, where it's all kind of cell shaded, where maybe it got like a minimal release, like at a Fathom event at a Regal, but beyond that, it was mostly just straight to DVD, but it's still like a PG-13 or R rating, and they got one or two big voice actors or like actors in there to voice, like, oh look, we got Patrick Stewart to voice this guy over here or something to that effect. I don't think he is in that, but I'm just making an example. I know he voiced some anime, like, oh, he's in this, but anyway. So I feel like this movie kind of scared them away from ever wanting to touch an R-rated or PG-13 at least CG movie other than Sausage Party, which did that one do good in theaters?
Well, that's one of those movies that probably it did as good as it needed to sort of do. You know what I mean? Like since it was just a comedy, it kind of probably did by because I fucking love that movie. I thought that was like one of those ones I'm like, oh, this movie's so fucking dialed in. And then I think that movie definitely if Spirits of Finn scared anybody away, the Sausage Party definitely scared people away because that movie's one of those ones you don't realize how intense that is. You can't show that just to anybody.
Yeah, even if you think like, oh, I like R-rated comedies, like this one's a bit more. Like I've seen South Park a few times. Like which episodes?
Yeah, have you seen them all? Yeah. you literally have to see them all to be able to like for me to let you know that you can handle this. Yeah. But it's kind of weird because this movie too. It's like they talk about this movie. It's like, oh, it didn't do good enough. I'm like, well, technically, it actually did really good as a movie. It's just the movie cost like a ridiculous amount to make. It was that was like the downfalls. You have this like super high end technology, and they started at like 4 years in advance, and then it was like one of those ones like it was like a couple of years later, like shit, the technology jumped again. We gotta fucking go back and like kind of refix up some of these scenes now because the old ones aren't matching the new ones.
Well, the other weird thing about this movie is they kind of decided, because Square is like, you know what, Final Fantasy, it's a really narrative-based game, and it's really kind of cinematic. What's stopping us from doing, like, our graphics look great. What's stopping us from doing, like, a movie? Yeah, we could do CG movies. Yeah, that'd be awesome. And I want to say with the system, the engine they created was called Project Gray, which is, I think that's why they named Gray in this movie after that engine. But like Project Gray, we'll give it a shot, and they just made a little short film, tested it out. Like, I think we could do more with this. Yeah, let's do that. And this movie's a weird collection of because they decided to go forward with that before they had a plot or really even a concept for the movie. They just knew they wanted people that worked on Final Fantasy making a movie. And I guess with that and a couple of slight references, you can call this movie Final Fantasy. But I overheard they wanted to make more fantasy-focused things and make it have more resemblance to the game, but all that shit was shot down by the studio. Like, we don't fucking get it. Nerds aren't gonna... You think nerds are gonna pay for all this shit? Fuck off, And then out of that, they kind of made a weird collection of just like, all right, well, we can't do some of the weird, fantastical things that the series is known for, so I guess we'll make kind of this quasi... alien ripoff kind of thing,
Well, that's the weirdest thing too. Is like, is the fact that when you kind of watch this movie in hindsight, like almost like if nobody told you it was a Final Fantasy movie, somebody'd be like, "What? Are you watching the Halo? Are you watching a Halo movie? Or are you watching like a fucking Gears of War or like Mass Effect?" And it's almost like this movie's very like forerunning for the fact that like that's sort of the look that like so many things in the 2000s have, is that Spirits Within look. You know, it sounds weird, but like look at the fucking helmets that the guys are wearing, like the Marines. They all look like Gears of War. They look like Carmine's helmet. You know what I mean? And even just like the look of some of the ships and everything kind of has that like Halo look, and even Mass Effect. And the guy who created Mass Effect said he took like big inspiration from the Spirits Within as well too. So it's like, oh, fucking makes sense now. All. But it's just kind of, it's weird how like it's almost like, yeah, maybe like the Soul movie itself isn't always like the strongest, but like the takeaways from it like really like defines like what the 2000s sort of is in video games. It all has like that gray kind of desaturated look. You know, it's always kind of, you know, like dystopian, like sci-fi, and yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, because it all does have that also sense of like the militaristic science fiction, like everyone's on their last like hanging on the edge there. And I think even with this setting and the characters, I still think you can incorporate it and make it feel more Final Fantasy-ish. It's just, it's so weird because I mean, I think you could still say, okay, there is like these creatures that came from space attacking the world. We're inside these little, you know, these little walled off cities. I still think there's room for something to be Final Fantasy oriented in that. Just like little, like whether it be the weapons, like making the weapons a little bit more fantastical, or maybe you don't have to call it magic, but they could have been using magic. They kind of learned like harness through the weapons, and then so I'm not trying to totally rewrite the whole movie, but I think there's small subtle things they could have done, and maybe more just differences between the characters, because I know even in Final Fantasy by this point they're all anime archetypes, and this one they're all the sci-fi movie archetypes. There's like the funny nerdy guy who's might as well be the Black. What his last name's Black? What's Shane Black from Predator? Then you got Gray, who might as well be your total like badass altogether guy. Then you got the guy voiced by Ving Rhames, who might as well just be, you know, he's
any black like guy. Just he's just cool, lovable. He's just the black cool, action guy. Yeah, you know what I mean.
The cool, lovable black guy that's in like every like '90s action movie or sci-fi movie.
Then there's Tough
and
Girl.
Then you got Aki Ross, who's like, you know, oh, she's smart and she's caring and she's determined. And then you got Jane, who is the who actually I think the black dude's name is Ryan. I think that's his name in the movie. So yeah. But anyway, then you got Jane, who might as well just be, she's like the badass Mexican chick that dies in every action movie.
Yeah, exactly. Like the one that's, you know, aliens and so on. And
even though she's not Mexican, but she's that role. There's always, oh, is that the badass chick that's very capable and can handle herself? I don't know why, but she's going to die by the end of this.
Yeah, they always kind of do. It's like Michelle Rodriguez really took that role over in the 2000s.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Shit, she even fucking dies in Fast and the Furious and then comes back. But it's just one of those ones, like, it's funny how it's almost like this movie's like so ahead of the curve, but maybe just like a slightly too ahead. I mean, like, it still kind of has those other things that sort of missing. Like, yeah, as Final Fantasy, I think small things, like even if you would have just kept the characters the way they sort of looked, like literally just giving them like, hey, this character has like a gun blade, and maybe it's like you could make it sort of more sci-fi instead of, old fashioned. But you could have gave them that, or like they even talked about like literally the Ving Rhames character was supposed to have like a Gatling gun or something on his arm, kind of like Barrett. And I think that would have been the thing to do, would have been like to sort of cherry pick from like, Final Fantasy 1 through 8, and I guess you could even say 9 by that point, but when they're making this movie, I guess 9 wasn't really a part of everything. So almost by taking just little elements from that and just kind of giving it like a little bit more, it's like really the only element they really have is like, hey, there's an old man named Sid and he has an airship,
There's an old man named Sid, and I guess these aren't strictly Final Fantasy tropes, but I guess you could attribute it because they're all in Final Fantasy. It has a villain that is meant to be sympathetic and meant to have grander goals, but he just goes about it the wrong way. They have this whole underlying theme of life and what comes next. And then it has this whole, person thrusted into it. I mean, I don't think those are strictly Final Fantasy things, but I think those are all things you see in a Final Fantasy game. You know what I mean?
Well, it has some of those like kind of Seven type stuff because they're sort of like the planet's dying and we need to protect the planet and fix it, you know. So it sort of has,
kind of,
and you know, and they got the meteorite coming down and everything like that. So it has a little bit like I'll say it probably takes a lot from Seven. Now, granted, that makes kind of sense if they started working on it 4 years in advance. Well, that's right when Seven kind of is out and so on. So they're probably thinking more of that than anything else. I know that, like, it's like the cutscenes wise, because I remember, like, when Final Fantasy VIII came out, there was literally, like, a fucking special, like, on, I almost want to say it might have been, like, the History Channel or something like that, because it might have been talking about, like, the history of video games. And at that point, it was like, I just remember being like, what the serious fuck? They're talking about fucking video games? Like, on the history, like, you know what I mean? Like, shit, you know, mostly they're just talking about things from my grandpa, like Adolf Hitler, you know, and, like, the Spanish War.
Things my grandpa liked.
Yeah, grandpa, he always likes to see how Hitler died in many different angles.
I already got shot. Yeah, I
already got shot. Well, there's this other theory that involves aliens. Well, there's this other one that has a werewolf in it. Grandpa's like, the werewolf one sounds kind of plausible.
Yeah, I do like how the History Channel eventually became like, was Blackbeard secretly a lizard man?
Yeah, you know. But at this time period, this is really when History Channel was like straight history, like before they started adding all the weird...
World War II only, and if you wanted anything other than World War II, you had to be probably at midnight or at 6 in the morning.
Yeah, exactly, kind of like that. But they had literally this like hour-long special on sort of like the history of video games. And, you know, this is before like a tech TV. This is before fucking G4. This is like... You know, I mean, like, yeah, granted, there's always been some kind of program here and there, but, you know, like, what else do you have? Like, fucking Nick Arcade or something like that? You know what I mean? And you got that hip black guy up there like, yeah, come on, guys, let's dance. We're going to play some video games. Okay, let's stroll on over. Okay, what do you want to play? You know, like,
he runs behind one of the like machines. You just hear like, all right.
Just fucking snoring up some fucking goo or whatever, like fucking, like, you know, they dropped this on the audience, but shit, if you snort this stuff, oh man,
uncut, holy fuck, yeah.
I don't know what it's made of, but it's fucking great. So it's like, you know, having this, like, you know, it was almost like taken serious, because this is almost that time period where I feel like video games were kind of finally sort of taken somewhat serious. I mean, I know this comes from like the personality of like a 10-year-old kid being like, they finally fucking get my generation.
Well, there's also, like, you think back on a lot of
shit. Well, Grandpa, look, World War II and Final Fantasy VIII, same place, same level of importance. Look at Grandpa, look at they're showing the ballroom dance scene in Final Fantasy VIII where Noah danced with Squall. See, that is like fucking historic. You know what I mean? That's like more important than the Mona Lisa. They're gonna fucking have that on walls 500 years from now.
Only can move, unlike Mona Lisa.
Yeah,
she fucking sucks. She's not even hot.
Yeah, it's gonna be like it's gonna be like one of those like Harry Potter fucking pictures. What's that? What's a Harry Potter, you ask? I don't know. It's this book that fucking nerds are into at school. I don't know. Probably not going anywhere.
I saw the movie because someone brought it into class the other day. I was sure to beat him up and take his lunch money after the fact.
but yeah, just like, so going into all that stuff and what have you, like, you kind of get, because that's the one thing also about, like, Spirits of Finn, though. I remember watching that movie, and it was like, literally, that felt like it was about as lifelike as you could get. It's like, dude, they fucking got it. Because in, like, 2001, it's just like, it was like, so, like, almost it was kind of like, someone had to kind of point out to you that it was CG. It's like, really? Fuck, are you kidding me? That's a live action actor here and there, right? Yeah. And it is. You know, it's just too good looking.
Well, what? Watching that movie, well, that's the thing about a lot of CG movies, like, watching it again, it doesn't look horrible, but it's also one of those things, like, this technology moves so fast, so things look dated really quick. I remember when the first, Attack of the Clones or Revenge of the Sith came out, they looked amazing when they first came out, but now...
It was like, literally, when they came out on DVD, you're like, wait a second.
Yeah, that's how long it takes for this stuff to become outdated. So, who knows how the Marvel movies are going to look like in a few years, but,
I will say, though, Spirits of Finn, though, I mean, like, granted, yeah, you could watch it now and you're like, you know that it's CG. It still looks fucking good, though. Like, it's still, like, some real fucking dialed-in CG. I mean, for, like, I guess maybe because I look at it, like, sort of, like, a historical sense, but, like, you know, it still is pretty fucking smooth, you know? I mean, granted, like, when I was a kid, fucking, I played a Sega CD game and I thought it was real.
Well, I'll say this:
you go back in time and it's fucking like 140p resolution, like a CD disc, and it's not even fucking real. It's actually like animated. That you didn't realize that's what it was.
Well, it's like I'm gonna make a comparison here. Like, I think it definitely looks good for the time it came out and all that, and there's certain shots and certain things that still look all right. But I think, say something like like in Jurassic Park, things in Jurassic Park 1, CG stuff in Jurassic Park, still looks good because most of the dinosaurs that come in, like when it's dark out, are usually at night or dimly lit room. There's a few scenes where they're jumping out and it's bright and light out, but most of the scenes, like the scene with the T-Rex pushing the car over the ledge, when it's not a puppet and it's CG, or when the T-Rex is chasing them, it's raining and it's at night. So I think that's one of the things you can kind of hide some of the flaws in that. And I think that's why that holds up. Where a lot of this, even though it's still very desaturated and kind of gray tones, it looks very like I said, it looks good for the time, but this technology moves so quickly, and you can't deny it was the first one to take a swing. Can't deny it that.
Yeah, well, it's that kind of thing where, like, I'll say this movie's all CG, so it's kind of different. Like, I think it's one of those ones when you're comparing, like, live-action movies that have CG in them, that's when you could see, like, I think more of a stark contrast, but, like, since this one's 100% or CG, it kind of meshes together, I think, better. And that, to me, is sort of, like, why I feel like it holds up kind of... I mean, as long as you're into CG, like, movies, I think that's the thing, is... and that was the weird thing. Even when I was a kid, I fucking hated CG for the most part. But I was like, well, it's a video game movie. It's okay. They can use it there because video games, they use CG.
Well, it's also like thinking back on this. Just jumping over to because we've just been talking about how the movie's made. I guess we can talk about how the movie moves along and the story and all that without because I don't think there's really a whole lot to say story-wise. Essentially, aliens come down to Earth. They destroyed the world, basically, and they lived in these walled-off cities the aliens can't penetrate, and they're more or less ghosts. And Aki Ross, who's the main character of the movie, is a scientist going around trying to track down these different spirits these different spirits within just random life forms they think could, balance things out and destroy these ghosts. And they don't want to fire where the meteorite landed that brought the ghost on it. They don't want to fire that down. They don't want to fire it down because they think it's going to hurt the planet, because they believe that's where Gaia, which is another Final Fantasy reference, is at the center of the Earth. And if they fire it along, they can just destroy the Earth itself. And there's, James Woods, who's the only guy in the command room dressed like an SS officer, being like, "Oh, hey, well, I don't see what the big fucking deal is," And well, should we let the guy dressed like a Nazi be the one calling the shots? Who else we got right now? Just go with it. And from there, it's the movie, she teams up with her ex-boyfriend and her team, and they're trying to find these different spirits. And then by that, it's a treason plot takes place and whatnot. I think you could bounce around the story, but I feel like they go here, they go there, they go here, they go there. Yeah, they drop the thing, it ends.
Yeah, they fight some ghosts. A meteor comes down. They go into space for a moment. They have a scene that's kind of reminiscent of Final Fantasy VIII. Some of these things, they only really tie together because you think of it like Final Fantasy, and you go, "Oh, well, I guess that's kind of like that scene there," and so on.
If you're looking for Final Fantasy references, I think you could find them, but it's not immediate. You have to think in the context. Maybe this is supposed to be a reference to that. Maybe.
It's if you didn't know, if it was just called the Spirits Within, you probably would never put two and two together.
Yeah, you might go well, if that black dude had a robotic arm, and because that looks kind of like Midgar, kinda,
Yeah.
Midgar was at least a little bit more visually interesting because this looks like generic futuristic city number 345.
Yeah, it almost has this that, almost like those Judge Dredd type buildings where it's just here it's just a house, a bunch of fucking poor people.
Well, Judge Dredd, here's the thing with that. That's still interesting. There's something about dystopian future where everything's futuristic but still not really well put together. That itself is interesting. Dredd is very interesting. And you could say what you will about the Judge Dredd movie, but at least visually it's an interesting movie. But this one, it's just everything looks clean cut. Everything looks like it's in this nice future building, but everything's kind of dark and dreary and kind of, I don't know. It's one of those things I get what they're going for, but visually, even though they made this huge leap forward, I think since they didn't lean more on the Final Fantasy-ness or more of they went like dreary enough just to stay dreary, not dreary enough to be interesting. Like there's no shacks, there's no interesting architecture, there's no characters with like this weird with like interesting clothing that makes it look they have their own society. They all look like generic future clothes with maybe a couple letters or labels, a couple like futuristic letters or something on it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it goes for like it tries to be like the almost like a grounded in reality kind of feeling, you know, instead of trying to be over the top. And I think that kind of, and I mean, like, granted, obviously that's the grounded reality stuff mostly always seems to outwin like the over the top stuff. It's kind of weird how that always sort of is. You always think about like what's the most popular video games? It's Madden and Call of Duty. And how in Call of Duty, how to get popular by not being World War II anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's like, I feel like the average Joe just wants things to be kind of simple and I want to be, you know, like real life and not too complicated. I don't want characters to have too wild a hair because I don't have any hair, so it pisses me off when I see some guy with big spiky hair. And, you know, I want their clothes to be unbalanced where he's got one shoulder pad, no shoulder pads on the other side. It makes me angry.
I'm not saying to that level. I'm not saying everyone looks like a squall or even like a cloud, but to the degree of where it looks different. You know what I mean? Because I'll say sometimes, in all honesty, I really like some of the ways some of the Final Fantasy characters look. But other times I see like the amount of product they have in their hair, and they just have like some belt that doesn't even fit them, and it's holding some sword. Like, motherfucker, you can't swing that sword. Well, your belt doesn't even fit around your fucking waist.
Those are all the Final Fantasies that came post the creator. Because the creators 1 through 9, and all those Final Fantasies are all fine and dandy. It's once you get 10 and above, that's when you start getting some of those ones. Not saying there's anything wrong with some of those games, but like you could see that like that's when once the original creator kind of left, I felt like the manliness sort of left the room too at the same time.
I'm taking all this testosterone with me. No,
yeah,
but like, and the Axe body spray. No,
because you would think about like Advent Children, like the look that the characters have in that's not how they look in Final Fantasy VII. You know what I mean? Because like Cloud in Final Fantasy VII just looks more like a badass kind of like, you know, like 90s anime character. Be like, yo, what up? I'm Cloud. Where, you know, in Cloud and like Advent Children's like, hey, I'm Cloud.
Well, he has that stupid little half dress and that stupid little arm dress thing. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of the thing that's like, really? All right.
I mean, I know
he's just so moody. Moody the whole time. I know he's always been a little moody, but...
And I know he's wearing purple and fucking... you can't really deny he's wearing a ginormous purple outfit, but here's the thing. The Joker wears a fucking purple outfit, too, and he fucking kicks ass.
He's got a nice jawline, yeah. And the other thing about, like, the Advent Children movie is... I get they're meant to be irritating, and they're meant to be unlikable, like children, but the 3 villains of that movie are so fucking annoying. And you see the one dude who looks kind of like a rockabilly, and you're like, okay, this guy might be a badass, and he's the first one crying right off the bat. Like, are you shitting me? The one guy who looks like he's in like in a rockabilly band, and he's the one like, you meanie, you know, just like...
See, that's what happens when father isn't home. when boys aren't
that's what happens when mother isn't home. They didn't give him like father is probably Sephiroth is like boy, you know, the whole time. like Geneva, mother, you have to. Is it Geneva or Genova? Genova, like mother, save me from father.
That's the thing. Is the Sephiroth's is kind of god, so it's like they didn't have a man in the house to raise them. Fucking Sephiroth. Yeah. But
I guess, or Sephiroth like their brother or some shit. Because I guess that's because they all come from Genova or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I guess by that standard they sort of are. Like
who fuck cares? But by this point, but
fucking,
it's one of those things.
Not the original creators, characters. Let's just say that.
Well, even because we talk about Final Fantasy VII, the movie, I like that one, but it still is flawed. But I still like it. But the thing about it is, at least it looks like Final Fantasy. To the most extent,
yeah,
it's visually interesting. I don't need to have the characters hopping around like Mario, bouncing all over the place. I mean, that's cool, but I don't need that for this movie. But at the same time, I mean, it's more hindsight, but I guess I feel like this movie could have used some more of like just that fantasy look. And it's weird how the movie apparently was doing that. Like, there's not a whole lot of what the movie was going to be before then, but they were going to take more visual cues from Final Fantasy. But they're just like, pull back on that, and pull back on this.
Well, it's the weird thing too. It's like, okay, Final Fantasy VII sold like over 1 million copies in the U.S. because that was like the first time that like an RPG was actually a big deal. It actually sold more than Japan in the U.S. You know, and before that, it's like it's not saying that RPGs weren't popular, but it was like in your regular Nintendo and Super Nintendo days, like RPGs was kind of like. That's that fucking kid over in the corner playing. You know what I mean? It wasn't. I really think it took Final Fantasy VII and Pokemon to sort of make Final Fantasy or to make RPGs kind of a little bit more well known. I think as the average kid would start up an RPG and be like, "The fuck am I supposed to do?"
Reading, ew. But at the same time, I think because there are kids who knew what Final Fantasy was. And I'll be honest, that was that point where it's like you pick a side, Nintendo, Sony, or Sega.
Yeah.
And I saw the trailer for Final Fantasy VII on television, and I didn't really know a whole lot about it. But I mean, I don't remember there being a whole lot of like actual footage of the battles or gameplay, but I remember cool cutscenes. And at the time, those cutscenes were amazing. Like, oh my god, what is that? So I think when it's vague enough and you see what that looks like okay, and then a kid gets it at that point. I'm talking about kids who don't know what Final Fantasy is. They get it by that point. I'm like, what the fuck is this? Oh, well, it's already my one Christmas gift or my own one game for the year or whatever. I guess I'll just play through it. And like, oh, what? It's actually pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Kind of like that sort of thing. But like, you almost think that for a game that sold, so well, they could just be like, you know what? Let's just almost market it hard to that audience because that audience, no matter what's going to bring their parents and they're going to bring like their friends and so on, and hopefully just rely more on that. Which instead, I felt like what they were trying to do, they're like, you know what? Let's try to sell it to the parents. That's almost how this sort of feels like it's trying to do that more than anything else. Where it's like, well, we already know the fucking kids are going to show up anyways. Now we got to get mom and pop in Oklahoma to come see it. You know what I mean?
I'm not saying this totally like it's always the case, but a lot of times if you are adapting something that is at that moment targeted towards children primarily, you almost kind of gotta wait for it to get older and where people that liked it grew up to like have a hand in making it. Because I feel like not always the time, but I think that's when you're gonna get people who actually respect it. I think there will be people now. I think there are things, if you look long enough, you could find examples. Like, we both like the Mario movie, but I wouldn't be the least bit surprised as to find out the people who made the movie didn't respect the property. They just went in there with an interesting take, and it ended up being a movie that you and I both liked regardless. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I feel like this was being produced, the people making the movie clearly liked Final Fantasy, but they were making, for how expensive it was just to animate everything and the characters, combined with the studio, which had no faith in the thing. They're just like, like Sony was like, what the fuck is this? It's on your PlayStation thing. Oh, I forgot we had that. Yeah. Okay. Fuck. Hey, Jeff Vintar, why don't you like take a stab at this? Oh, let me take a look at that. Fuck, dude, we need more time than like 2 months to rewrite this. 2 weeks to rewrite this thing. Well, how do you need? Oh, I need like a whole fucking year because this thing's fucking stupid. Oh, you got 3 weeks. Okay.
Whenever I hear that, when people are like, I need a year to write a script, I'm like, what are you, fucking retarded? Like, how long does it take you to write a script? Like if somebody told me that it was going to take them a year to write a script, I'd be like, get the fuck out. You are clearly not a writer. I don't even know what you fucking are. Like, you are not a writer. If you can't write a script in at least a month, you are not a fucking writer. You know what I mean? Like, shit. Like,
yeah, I feel.
What are you gonna do for that whole year? Like, how much fucking unless the guy was gonna be like, I'm gonna go and beat every fucking Final Fantasy game, and then I'm gonna do Dragon Quest, and then I'm gonna, it's so on. Like, he was gonna go on like this fucking pilgrimage to like fucking like the mecca of RPGs, and he was gonna be so fucking immersed in this, and he'd be doing fucking RPG kung fu like in his mind as he slept. That would be different, but we know he's not. He's gonna go home. He's gonna fucking like kick his feet up for the first 6 months and not do a goddamn fucking thing.
Well, the thing also about that is looking at, I'm not trying to just beat up on that guy, but he also added, because the thing about it is what you got to do is you got to rewrite it, you got to write it in English, and then you got to present it to the Japanese studio, and they got to rewrite it for themselves to make the characters animate, and then it comes back redubbed from that to English again, and that's why the dialogue is really stiff in a lot of spots, and like because it just comes across as like a weirdly dubbed anime, and it's just one of those things where watching this movie, because the character wise, there's really not a whole lot going on because everybody is archetypes, because you have like the general, the colonel guy, Gray, voiced by Alec Baldwin, who is basically just generic. He's basically any video game protagonist from a sci-fi military shooter.
He's like the Doom guy almost in a sense.
He's really Shepard. He's also kind of Shepard, really, like default Shepard before you really give him a chance to do anything like fucked up or crazy or punch someone in the face.
Yeah. Exactly.
Or then you got Aki.
Before he goes and offends Fox News by fucking aliens.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. She's not like an amazing character, but Aki Ross, who's voiced by the lady who did Mulan. Yeah, Chun-Li in Mulan. Yeah.
That was the thing. It's like,
I think
Ming, it's fucking Chun-Li. Yeah, her name's like Ming Nu Wu or whatever.
Yeah. Like, I'll say it's an interesting choice that they went out of their way to make her the main character, because usually movies like this don't do that. And I think that's a very Japanese move, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think that's a bbad thing at all. But there was something interesting. Spoilers here for those who haven't seen the movie. When it's jumping around, when they finally reach the point of Gaia, and it's like, oh wow, it's only like 200 feet underneath the Earth's crust. That's fucking weird, right? And then they have to sink in the spirits with everything. Apparently, there's an earlier draft where she was pregnant, and her child had that spirit.
Mm-hmm.
So
like the last spirit they needed or whatever.
Yeah. So rather than Gray sacrificing himself for his ex-girlfriend, he was sacrificing himself for his ex-girlfriend and his child that was yet to be unborn. So I'm like, you know what? You can say everything else you did about the movie, but why would you take that out?
And
that makes a lot more sense. That makes that ending a little bit more like interesting, a little bit more profound in some ways.
And I love how they go, that doesn't seem very American.
There somewhere in here there was like there was the phrase, it's a little too Japanese. It's like, oh, you mean the studio making the thing?
Yeah, the fucking what's the studio? Sony. So sometimes there's that kind of weird thing there, and what's also like you mentioned before how it's like you kind of have this chick as being the kind of the main character that almost kind of previously wouldn't have happened. It's kind of an odd thing that they sort of did at this time period, where and I don't know if it had something to do with Tomb Raider more than anything else. It's because you sort of had Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider was that game that like had, starred a female protagonist, and that was like all sold on it, and that was a game that was like, a guy could like it because, it's got a girl in it, unless it's one of those guys that fucking hates games that have women, like, in it. Like, those guys are, I don't play as a woman, I only play as a man. Secretly, I love that man. I love when his balls bounce in dead or alive. That doesn't happen. Does in my game. Like, why are you so proud of that?
There's a mod for it.
There's a mod for it. I made it. But, like, it's almost like these movies sort of did the thing, because it's like, I think of this one, and then sort of like Resident Evil. Because Resident Evil pretty much did the thing where it's like they made the female like the main character, but if you really think Resident Evil games, they're pretty equal. You're either Leon or Claire, or you're Chris or Jill. It wasn't like one character was more of a main character than the other one. It was just like, who do you want to be? And then as they kind of went on, they sort of made it, and it's almost like they associated video games with like, well, video games, have like the female is the main character, like, and that kind of became sort of like the movie sort of stereotype for a while. I mean, even when you think about Silent Hill, they make that girl like a female, because I think probably based upon this movie, Resident Evil, Tomb Raider, and so on. I mean, and I think that actually kind of works well, too. I mean, it's one of those ones, Harry's about the most, like, generic character known to mankind in Silent Hill when you really think about it. It's just like, look for my daughter. I'm wearing a brown, coat.
And wasn't it, like, Sean Bean that was playing Harry?
In the movie?
Silent Hill movie, yeah.
Oh, Harry's not in the movie.
Okay, well, the guy who's playing the dad, because the thing, Sean Bean,
I guess that's
guys
sort of Harry,
like...
but I always think the woman's more like woman Harry.
Woman Harry woman? No. Sean Bean was like the dad in that movie, I think.
Oh, that's right.
And it's kind of funny because Sean Bean dies in everything he's in, and this one he's just like, all right, babe. Well, let me know when you're home. I'm just gonna stay in here at the house in case I die.
I'm not going to Silent Hill.
I'm so gonna fucking die there. I died in the first Lord of the Rings. I never watched it, but apparently I died in the first season of Game of Thrones. Yeah, I'm staying right in this fucking house. I'm not in a horror movie going to a place called Silent Hill. Fuck that. And then, like, he's like, well, my wife didn't come back, or is that her ghost? I don't fucking know.
But it's kind of funny. It's like, because that's what I always say about, like, when, you hear people kind of complain about nowadays, they're like, oh, there's not enough female main characters. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, that's what video games used to be for the longest time, was female main characters. That was what all the late 90s and early 2000s. Fucking look at Dino Crisis, look at like Resident Evil 3, look at things like Blood Rain and so on, like that. Like, that was a big deal at like that time period,
Yeah, like the sexy badass femme fatale lady, like a Laura Croft or a Blood Rain or something kind of like that. That makes sense. I know that in that case, but I feel like at this time, because I feel like that kind of fluctuates, because I feel like at this time, seeing kind of like, a woman in this film that is not toting a badass gun, who is not doing backflips off of walls and firing at zombie dogs.
They're not,
I feel
like Frank Miller characters almost.
Yeah. Like, I feel like that out of that seems like a very different choice for this movie. You know what I mean? Like, it's not the choice you'd expect them to go with at this time. And I don't think this was the one to totally push it in that direction. I think that the one that maybe pushed the badass female, like, and lead in an action video game movie is probably Tomb Raider, because that movie did make a lot of money, and that movie is looked at as a massive financial success. So I can see from that kind of pushing it forward. But at the same time, it's kind of interesting because this movie had a lot of actors worried at the time, even like Tom Hanks. Like, this is kind of funny to me. Like, where was this one they had? Like, well, I know it's probably... Go ahead.
As I said, there's the one where, like, Matt Dillon shows up, like, hey, Matt Dillon, do you want to play a character? Come to Hawaii. Oh, I'll fucking go to Hawaii. And then he goes in there. He's like, well, what are we shooting? And he sees fucking, like, CG actors in there. It's like... Fuck this fucking CG actors, get them fucking out, they're not union, they're not fucking union, just like storms out like, this is fucking against everything I do.
Yeah, that's right, Matt Dillon.
Industrial revolution all over again.
I just see that, like, I see them, like, coming in, like, hey, why don't you do a voice for a character? Like, okay, cool. And then he sees this character, just, like, gets this intense look, like a slow zoom in on his face. He's like, J-Man! Flips the table over and, like, runs out of the studio, screaming demon. Then Alec Baldwin's like, yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah, that's fucking... A gig's a gig.
It's a paycheck.
It's funny, though, that this movie, though, like, scared actors, though, because they saw this and, like... Because I think there was also that thing where sometimes, they're just touting, like, this could be the future of fucking cinema. You know what I mean? And that's where Robert Zemeckis is like, well, it'll be the future of my cinema for a while.
I'm not going to lie. Since I have Disney Plus now, it just randomly popped up, that Mars Needs Moms movie. And I'm more just watching it out of, like, I'm not even done with it.
That just sounds like a fucking Rob Zombie song, Mars Needs Moms.
Oh, it's Mars needs woman, red hot
women. Mars needs moms, very loving mothers.
Well, I'm watching it.
Making apple pie.
I had to come back to it, but
fire. Changing the channel brings me a juice box.
Buys me a Jaguar 64, whatever. What was it? Jaguar. What system was it?
Atari Jaguar.
What?
Atari Jaguar.
Not the car Jaguar, like a system Jaguar.
Yeah, the Atari Jaguar.
Atari was that Atari Jaguar? What the fuck?
It's the last Atari system ever made.
Atari Jaguar? How the fuck did I ruined the bit? Fuck it. Anyway,
it has like one of the coolest versions of Wolfenstein 3D on it that nobody ever seems to bring up.
No, but there was I was watching that a little bit just out of curiosity, and aside from just the super creepy looking things in the movie, it's not a great movie so far. I'm just more watching because I like Zemeckis. I'm like, well, I don't technically have to pay for this movie right now. I know I'm paying $7 a month. I got all this other shit, so might as well check this out, I guess. And fuck, it's like, I'll take Final Fantasy over that thing any day, because this thing is like, well, first off, it's like super, you should watch it just at least the first 10 minutes, because it is prototypical shitty 90s kid to the max.
Like in a good way, or like in a horrible way where it makes you want to fucking strangle that child as the movie goes on?
It makes you want to strangle the child, but at the same time, you kind of want to watch it just because you're like, oh, wow, you know what? This is really like, this is probably even outdated at the time, you know?
Yeah.
It's kind of like Mitchell from like Doomsday, Superman Doomsday.
Well, that's one of the best DC characters ever made, is Mitchell. He's only in fucking like one book and sort of has a cameo in another book. It's not really him, but I like to believe that it has like, it's like a homage to him.
It's by Dan Jurgens, and he looks similar, and he would be that age, so I like to believe it is him. But anyway, this right here, going back to this movie, it's kind of funny, some of the people they originally had for this. So Robert De Niro, because they have, like, not that the people in the movie aren't good, but they seem to have, like, a bunch of big actors they wanted. Robert De Niro, they wanted to play Gray at first. And I'm just imagining, just like, because even at the time,
Just like way
De
too
Niro
old.
wasn't young. He wasn't young, so I could just imagine him in the recording booth being like, Aki. He's like, it's Aki. What? It's pronounced Aki. Not fucking saying that. That sounds fucking weird. Like, I'm having trouble imagining Robert De Niro, just his voice coming out of the super toned butch guy. Not that he's not a manly guy, but he's not. We all know what he looks like by this point, what he even looked like by then, And then they also had, like, Patrick Stewart originally as Sid, but before they got Donald Sutherland. And this would have been interesting. I really like James Woods as a villain. Like, I think his Hades is one of the best Disney villains, but he was originally going to be the general. Jack Nicholson was originally the general over James Woods.
Yeah, so, well, you can just kind of see here, they had those, like, $1 million actors, and it's almost like they kind of cut back and said, yeah, let's get, like, I'm not gonna say like B-level actors, but they got kind of like just a little bit down where it's like, okay, these guys are popular yet they're affordable, like Steve Buscemi and so on.
Steve Buscemi's probably, like, he and Ving Rhames are probably the two most likable characters in the movie, I'm gonna say.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like they kind of work. I do always think that's kind of weird. Like, it's like CG and cartoon movies. They always do this where it's like they always want to go out and get, like, oh, let's get a real actor. Like, well, why don't you just get fucking voice actors? Like, they do this every fucking day. That's their fucking job. Well, yeah, but we could get a real actor, and it's just always that sort of thing. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like sort of getting like, okay, we have like a fucking, like a rally race to do, but we're going to get this NASCAR guy to drive it instead. Be like, well, that's not what he does technically. I mean, yeah, they both drive cars, but.
Well, I feel it's probably, they view it as, well, if we could afford this guy, this movie means that this movie has, like, some authenticity to it. Some, like, it has, like, some good faith between, say, like, oh, if they did have Robert De Niro or Jack Nicholson, like, oh my god, those guys signed up for this thing, it must be something of quality. Yeah. It must be what goes through people's minds somehow. I mean, I'm always kind of surprised whenever they have, like, a straight to DVD, like, anime of some kind that's maybe a little bit more higher production than other ones, and then they have, like, a small cast of, like, oh yeah, we got Matthew Lillard to do a voice of somebody,
Yeah. I mean, like, those ones, but by this point, it's almost like, well, Matthew Lillard is pretty much like a voice actor nowadays. It's like, he's been playing fucking Shaggy since, like, 2001.
I like him, yeah. They had him as Shaggy in the movie, and then from there he started doing Shaggy in the cartoons.
And he's never stopped.
He's not in Scoob, but
well, he's in all the movies though still.
Yeah. But at the same time, it was like at that point in time, it's like, oh wow, they got Matthew Lillard. And he's like, I'm doing voice animation. I'm doing voice stuff only now, just about. But then you also would see someone, maybe not like a huge star, but at the time, now he's huge. But like I remember in some of the DCU movies, they would get like Michael B. Jordan or Bryan Cranston, and that's when like they could probably still afford him at that point,
Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes, like, I feel like whenever they get those, like, I feel like they're like, you know what? This is going to sell it to that person who's never going to watch a DC movie anyways, but maybe that will be the turning point, And because it's like, I really will say this, I don't think anybody who's like a DC fan doesn't really care that they got those actors. Like, at the end of the day, I think they sort of understand that there's a bunch of great voice actors out there anyways. It's not saying there's anything wrong, but like, it's, you know what I mean? It's almost like money wasted, like sort of to try to get like a bigger name actor. You're like, shit, why don't you just fucking make the fucking animation 10 minutes longer? You know what I mean? Like
by that point, you just, well, it's like, let's get all we need is by this point is Tim Daly and Kevin Conroy.
Yeah, exactly. Because sometimes I feel like when they get those one actors, like, who are you trying to sell this to? That's all I always kind of wonder. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, you're going to get that mom who's going to stop me like, oh, I like that Breaking Bad thing. You know what? I never tried this Batman stuff, but I think today's the day. And maybe they're like, probably at Warner Bros. They're like, you never know. You fucking never know, man. Like, that mom might turn a fucking new leaf that day.
I'm going to say on that same note, I mean, this is a much more bigger, broader film series, or a bit bigger, more successful film series because it goes to theaters and all that, but Vin Diesel is Groot. Like, are you fucking kidding me?
That just I mean like well one's like yeah we have the fucking money, yeah, we'll fucking pay Vin Diesel because that's gotta be fucking expensive. I have no idea what Vin Diesel gets paid, but I bet you he gets probably paid just as much as everybody fucking else, because even though oddly enough Vin Diesel was, if he didn't really have Fast and the Furious, he would be just one of those like almost like C-list action stars. I don't mean that bad way, because I love Vin Diesel and I'll watch anything he's in. But really, if you take away Fast and the Furious, the next biggest thing he has is Pitch Black, and that movie's kind of almost even forgotten by this point. That was a big deal. That was a big deal when this movie came out, when Spirits of Finn came out.
Well, even Pitch Black, going back to that, that's still comparing that to something like this, even though it has that whole dystopian kind of, at least that planet they're on has the whole kind of dystopian world thing. You have to, try to stay alive, and it's kind of a quasi horror movie. And this has elements of being a quasi horror film since they're fighting ghosts, and it feels like there's nothing they can do to stop them. But I'm going to say something about Pitch Black, and that's at least, even though it kind of takes place in this big Star Wars level world, we just see little bits of it. That's the thing about it. That's what's interesting about the Riddick universe is Pitch Black. You can tell it's bigger, it's more expansive. Chronicles of Riddick explores that, and that one's for some reason not as good as others. But then the next one, the Riddick, I think it's just called Riddick.
Just called Riddick.
That one was fucking badass, and that made that happy middle ground where it's kind of back to being a quasi horror film at the same time a western, at the same time like it has like that it's more of an expansive thing on that universe,
Yeah, that movie's so well put together. But it's funny because all those movies, though, they all kind of like really Spirits of Finn. I mean, I guess you would say Matrix is the one that gives that initial start to like sort of the look I always feel the 2000s, because Matrix sort of gave like the black, the desaturated look and so on, and then it kind of like expanded with other stuff. But it's like, Spirits of Finn sort of has that going too, probably even made almost technically even before Matrix, if you think about it, it's made that early on. And it carries on with all these other things. I just think like, look at like Doom 3. Like Doom 3, what does that fucking look like? That looks like they're fucking in a similar place as Spirits Within. They're all wearing like those outfits that are almost kind of, it's got a little bit more color, but you know what I mean? It's not that far off.
Do you feel like, because you see what the aliens looked like, what the phantoms looked like before they all died and became these ghost figures, do you think they did the whole translucent thing? Like, look, it's going to be a lot easier to render and make if we do it that way.
Yeah, probably, because it already sounded like it was such a hard thing to render as is. It's like, we needed like all these fucking Pentium like supercomputers to fucking render out like one frame, and each frame takes up so much fucking data. Like there was just so, I mean, like you could see that being just like such an issue.
Let me ask you this, because the movie tries to play it off slightly like we have to stop them, but the phantoms, they're just confused and angry. They don't know where they're at. They're not really bad, but we just got to stop them. Were you still like, fuck them, kill them all? Did you still feel that way? Because that's how I did.
Yeah, I kind of felt like, no, they're fucking experience points flying around. That's all I gotta say. This is Final Fantasy, right?
Exactly. And I was just like, because that's the thing, because they try to play it off like, oh, they're not that bad, but then I'm like, no, fuck them. They're just killing everything they see. That's like, yeah, I don't give a shit.
That always sounds like that video game thing where they're like, the monsters aren't really that bad. Well, I killed like 2 billion of them like in the process, and now we came to that conclusion.
A lot of the times when video games try to do that thing where they tempt you to kill something, and then it later shames you for killing it, like, hey, fuck you threw it in front of me. Don't suddenly get all fucking righteous on me.
Kind of like Metal Gear Solid 3, and you're like, shit, I shouldn't have killed all those guys. It makes this part take like 15 fucking minutes.
Yeah, you have to walk by all the dudes you kill, and I'm not gonna lie, when I do that part in Metal Gear Solid 3, I'm just admiring my work. That's how I'm doing.
I remember like when that first happened, I literally thought the game kind of fucking glitched out. I'm like, is it just repeating itself over and over here? Like shit, when's this gonna end?
Apparently, I like slitting throats.
Yeah.
Because it would actually have, it's like, oh, this guy, if you slit their throat, they'd have the guy walking by with blood spurting out, like, whatever, and then like, yeah, that guy's funny. Just keep walking.
Oh, look, that guy got blown up. Well, what an ass.
You just want some dude like stumbling like on fire, just like, all right, whatever.
Right,
I did not feel bad at all in that part of the game. I get what it's trying to do, and I'm wondering what happens if you don't kill anybody in that. Do you just walk by a bunch of sleeping people, or what happens there?
If you do kind of like speed run the game and not, it just goes by really quick. It's like it's kind of it's almost. I'll say this is if you sometimes as far as it is like there's something to be said about not killing as many people because it just doesn't take as much time.
Well, it's also like one of those things of like my thought process is eventually Big Boss becomes a villain, so of course he's going to go on a murder rampage. Why am I suddenly going to go do the good thing now?
Oh, exactly. Fucking 60s. It's wartime.
Yeah. Anyway, when they get down to the meteorite in the movie and they're trying to stop, the because then that's where the planet's Gaia starts trying to take over the Earth's Gaia, and that whole bullshit. Didn't that look like some Parasite Eve shit?
Yeah,
it makes sense because it's from Square. It's from
Square.
Squaresoft.
So it makes sense. Yeah, that time Squaresoft. But yeah, it does have that kind of feel to it too. So they're pulling some stuff in there. It's like you do get a sense of some video game-ness to it, but it is still kind of also like a little bit distant from it. I don't know.
Going back to the one thing we were talking about earlier about actors being afraid that this is going to put them out of work. They were going to try and do, because, Final Fantasy Spirits Within, they're going to try and catapult Aki Ross as a virtual actress and put her in other movies playing different characters. And even go as far as, like, try and lease her out to other movies if they want to use her.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I just think that right there, I'm just imagining how scared all these actors were of this movie. Just like, are you really that fucking scared of it? I mean, come on. But at the same time, it's like... I think it's funny, the idea of Matt Dillon walking in being like, Damon! Like running out of the studio.
Well, it's no different than someone who works in fast food and then like, they're scared that a robot's going to replace them like any moment now.
I think those people have a little bit more worries than actors. I think, the world is still... I think it took this movie to put that fear in people because it's going to be a little while before we get like a CG PG-13 movie that's not a comedy going to theaters. I feel like that's going to be a little while before that happens. If that does happen, it's usually some weird artsy movie, Well, or it's going straight to Netflix.
Well, that's kind of the weird thing. You still kind of think about like, yeah, there's almost never been like just a straightforward, whether it be CG or whether it be like animated, like, it could be like traditional art or so on. We still don't have, in a sense, a cartoon that's like just a normal movie. You know what I mean? It's not a comedy. It's not a kid's movie. It's literally just a regular movie. I mean, I guess other than those let me rephrase that. I guess there's always those Robert Zemeckis movies, but
well,
you always kind of forget about those ones, but then you're like, oh yeah, those all came to theaters.
He was trying to push the only one of those that was PG-13 was Beowulf that I can think of. Everything else was a kids movie because he did Polar Express and they did Mars Needs Moms. I don't know what order it was, but he did those, and then like Rob just stop it.
Not the Grinch still.
But I like my computers, we know, but.
The Christmas Carol, and there were some other ones.
Christmas Carol. Yeah, he did Christmas Carol. That's right, with Jim Carrey.
Yeah, that's why I got confused with the Grinch when I was like, I knew it had something related.
Express. Yeah.
That's weird that Tom Hanks is like, well, maybe if I make myself a CG character, then the CG character fear will go away. That's how you fight this, Matt Dillon.
Yeah.
See,
he must become the enemy.
You know what? Here's the thing: in the future, they're going to be renting out the Tom Hanks character now, huh? How do you like that, Matt Dillon?
Well, I'm going to say that, like, all that stuff with, I think that once this movie bombed, it only bombed because how much over budget it went.
Yeah, because it really didn't bomb. It actually did pretty fucking well, but just, yeah, when a movie, it's like the Waterworld problem. It's like when a movie just cost a ton of money, it's just too hard to get that back.
I think it's kind of funny when a movie when they say, this movie is a financial bomb and it does more than like make its money back. Like it actually like doubles its budget. And like, it's a bomb. It's like, are you, Jesus Christ, It's like, how much? All right, whatever.
And who knows? If you add this movie up by its DVD sales and its like rental and everything like that, it fucking still makes a profit. Not a great profit.
But at that time, they're not looking for that at the time. These guys want it here. They want it now. And that's all they're looking at.
Yeah.
So, but because all that being... Oh, good.
I was just gonna say that was another thing about. I remember like Waterworld, like in the special features they said that they're like that movie actually made a lot of fucking money. It didn't make the money in the theaters, but as time went on, when it went to TV and it went to everything like that, like it made way beyond. It made like triple its budget back. Like it actually is there's like financially successful. Just nobody fucking notices that.
Yeah. No. either way, this movie is interesting when you look back on it. I don't think the movie itself is that interesting because I don't think it really has like it's weird. There's certain things that are there, but I don't think there are things you didn't see in a lot of like major motion pictures at the time, but things you saw in other media, like the super armored up soldiers that look like they're in outfits out of Gears of War or Killzone, you know, like that stuff. And like the whole, like if you look at the city that's all like, you know, walled off with the energy beam or the energy field or whatever, that looks like a still shot from something out of a Final Fantasy game. But when you actually get up close and see the buildings, it looks like futuristic generic city number 5, you know. So I think out of that, this movie it didn't really have enough of its own identity to it. I think there's a little bit of things there, and I think it takes a step forward by trying to be the first PG-13 CG movie, but that went to theaters. But just something about it just didn't pan out. Even James Cameron was a little sad because he went over to their studio in Honolulu and took a look at it and like, man, you guys beat me to it.
He's like, oh, I guess I'll just go work for 9 years on Avatar.
Yeah, and like documentary shit.
Just walks out the room, just fucking kicks like a rock in the sand, like, oh, shoulders all shrugged.
His private helicopter just lands. Like, I guess I'll just get on my private helicopter.
Yeah. Dream about
back and
one day
go look
making
for
a
the
Battle
Titanic.
Angel Alita movie, but I guess it's just not there yet.
Poor James Cameron.
Well, 'cause you almost think like the Alita movie, that you almost could say that like, because that one has like a full CG character as the main character in it. I mean, granted, it has realistic actors around it, but that's one of those ones where like, yeah, you actually technically have, because I remember for a while that people were like, oh, nobody's gonna want to have just a CG main character just standing around, you know, that wasn't like a cartoony one like Jar Jar Binks or something like that, you know, like a full on, like it's supposed to look kind of real, and like Alita pretty much has that. And 20 years later, but...
I remember watching. I'm thinking back on this movie, and you know what kind of reminds me of, sort of. There's a lot of those experimental animated movies from like it's its own thing, but I think it's kind of similar to a degree. There's a lot of those experimental adult animated movies from the late 70s through the mid 80s. Movies like Rock and Roll, Heavy Metal, Fritz the Cat. Like all those movies are different from one another, but it's that point of where it's trying something different. It's pushing things forward. Whether you love the movie or hate the movie, it is doing something different. But narratively, it's just a little off balance just because this movie was kind of pushing uphill, trying to make this thing happen. So they had to make compromises here, had to make compromises there. And out of that, they have a story that's a little bit clunky and doesn't run as smoothly as it could. You know what I'm saying? Heavy Metal is a little more of an anthology, so there's probably more room for forgiveness for that.
Well, Heavy Metal is fucking like amazing. Like that to me is like a perfect movie.
But I'm just saying, there's for a lot of people there'll be that weird disconnect on a lot of it. You know, I'm just saying, like, I like Heavy Metal, but it's one of those movies where I feel like for a lot of people, I mean, tits and violence aside, there's that kind of disconnect of the way the characters talk and act to a certain degree. You know what I mean? Kind of like, for instance, like
I think it's because they have sort of like, it has like a very like, because it's made by a bunch of like
speed run, has a very speed run fast thing. So it's like here's this 15-year-old kid who suddenly turned into a big badass black dude, and he's fucking every lady that comes in front of him. Next story.
He's voiced by John Candy.
Yeah, for some reason. Exactly, yeah. And then, like, you know, then you get to, like...
It's like my favorite part about that is just... I love how John Candy is just, like, right next door, and he just came on over and just kept voicing characters every once in a while.
We got these robots, we got these aliens, they're all, like, doing coke in space, watching, you know, watching politics, and then all of a sudden, you know, they beam a chick up, and a robot fucks her, no big deal, and they're now go back doing space cocaine or whatever. You know, it's just kind of like that thing of... I'm going to say Heavy Metal, probably there's more room for... There's probably more room for that because that's an anthology, so that one it's definitely able to get away with it more. But I think something like, say, Fritz the Cat, it's interesting, has interesting concept, and there's, you know, it's the first to do that kind of thing. But at the same time, there's a bit of this, like, the characterization isn't there. You know what I mean? Like, Fritz is kind of an asshole. You don't really give a fuck about him. That's probably supposed to be part of the plot. And But they have, like, also those long scenes, like those 5-minute scenes, or it seemed 5 minutes at least, of a crow snapping his fingers with a slow zoom in on the city just because they had to fill out time.
Yeah, well, those movies always have like not heavy metal, but the Ralph Bakshi movies always sometimes have kind of like the cutting corners because it is like a small, it's like in a sense like a low budget like animation studio. But those are always the kind of movies that's like I guess they're also in that same kind of category. Like can't just show it to anybody. Like obviously
Yeah.
you got to be one like really into like either like animation or comics or what have you. Slash you got to be able to handle like intense humor and adult materials.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just saying, 'cause not all those movies, but some of those movies, there's just still kind of like, and I understand why, because it was clunky. It was not clunky. It was like small studios. So they had to cut corners and make compromises. But there's some things in some of those movies I'm thinking of. They were kind of narratively, they're a little like unbalanced. Like a movie I really want to do that I like is Rock and Rule, and it's not a perfect movie, but I watched the other day and I really liked it. So I want to do that one sometime soon. But it was kind of a good example of that. And I'm thinking this right here is an example of, you know what? It was the first one out the gate to try this. And they probably had grander, bigger ambitions. But just given how hard it was to animate this, they had to cut corners in some ways, and it shows. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I think that's sort of like how it is, and it's like it's more like that movie where it's like it's historically legendary. It's a huge deal if you were kind of there at the time. I mean, granted, it's not a movie that you could pull out, and if somebody wasn't there in 2001, I just don't think they would get it as much unless they could like appreciate history and so on. Like it would be kind of hard to show somebody it, but it's really like that kind of movie that really sailed 1,000 more ships past it. You know what I mean? Like, it's that thing that it really kind of got a lot going in both video games and movies. You know, whether or not, I mean, like, not necessarily what I guess they wanted. Like, they wanted a series of these and they wanted, to kind of be like more CG characters and so on. But you think about just even if like maybe it's not just a full CG movie, but you think of just movies that come past it. Like they took a lot of this kind of technology that like was worked on for these 4 years. Think about like the Final Fantasy cutscenes that come on just PS2, like Dirge Cerberus or Final Fantasy 10, and all those ones. You know what I mean? They literally like probably this movie really kind of helps that section and so on.
Yeah, and they still gone on to make movies after this. They made Advent Children and they made Kingsglaive. So
yeah, Kingsglaive was really fucking good too. That was kind of a here and God movie, but
that's also one of those ones where it's kind of it was here more for just they only do them once in a while. But I think because no way Final Fantasy VII Remake doesn't do gangbusters, which might make them open up and want to try doing more. Maybe not movies like this, but maybe take another stab at making films again.
Well, it's like I look at like the Dragon Quest movie that came out. Now, if you just include that weird fucking Matrixy like ending, the rest of that whole movie was almost like that's kind of like what they should have done. That's like almost like what they should have done with this Final Fantasy one. Just made it have the realistic look, because that's sort of the difference between Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy. Dragon Quest just has a little bit more like it looks like it's a spin-off of fucking Dragon Ball Z, like a cartoon, where Final Fantasy just has a realistic look to it. Like a realistic anime look, let's say that. And I think, but beyond that, they're kind of the same thing, at the end of the day. That's not saying anything against the two, but, that's almost like, I know that's like a 20 years later fucking, like, here's what they should have done, but, like, I mean, if you would have kind of had it like that, I think that would have been the way.
Yeah. I mean, watching, I didn't really have that connect. I never played a Dragon Quest game, so I didn't really have that connection in watching that movie. So, but I was enjoying it. But then once it got to that ending, I was like, oh, I was okay. That was your choice. All right, cool. Yeah. I guess
it's like,
I
get it, but it's a fucking weird choice at the same time.
Yeah. So, no, I think that I'm gonna say that I really don't probably need. I myself probably don't need to watch this movie again. But if you're interested in like more of like film history and seeing like how this movie kind of pushed animation forward and also as being experimental at the time, I think it's worth checking out, at least if you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I definitely think for anybody who's into kind of like, especially filmmaking and all that kind of stuff, it's definitely like a must watch for sort of that kind of section, just if historical sense. But I'll probably watch again in 15 years once I forget. that's mostly what happens, is in 15 years from now I'll be like, I'll have like some Final Fantasy marathon and be like, fuck, I haven't watched Spirits of Fate in a while. And, yeah, it's not that it's bad. It's just like, it's just middle of the road, kind of like, just not as exciting as you kind of, it's that kind of movie where like you want to almost like it more, but it's just not as exciting as you kind of were hoping for.
It kind of meanders a lot. There's a lot of just hanging around, and a lot of the settings look the same. They're just these big industrial these big industrial like areas or this gray bleak wasteland, and then in 1 second like, oh look, it's a field of green in a dream for a minute. But and granted, I know Final Fantasy VII takes place in Midgar, but I feel like Midgar has a lot of different life and it has its own culture, you know what I mean?
Well, the second you get out of Midgar, which is only like, the first like 10th of the game anyways, it's just like all of a sudden it's like green. Look, there's life on the outside, color, area, you know what I mean? And that all goes away real fast.
Yeah, and then but even the thing with Midgar, at least Midgar, I mean, I'm just going off of the remake alone. At least just seeing what I've seen from, screenshots and, video game reviews on it, it looks like it's, they did a lot with the city and really expanded on it, where once you're right, once you do get out of Midgar, like, oh shit, I get all this out here too.
Yeah, and it's all in color, and yeah, it's kind of like I think the whole point of that's supposed to be like, hey, you have this really dreary world, but guess what? If you actually get out of it, there is some fun you can have, and so on. And yeah, I think that's kind of it with like Spirits Within. That's kind of the thing at the end of the day. It almost just needs a little bit more character and a little bit more like, I'm gonna say even just slightly over the topness, just a little bit. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But
I'm gonna say I heard part of the reason what's the main guy who made Final Fantasy? What's his name again?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
This is not the only thing, but this is one of the things that made him leave Square in the first place. I think because he wanted to make something more, and then through compromises, this is the one thing he was allowed to make, and then other things happened with the series. Like, I'm fucking done.
It kind of makes sense because Final Fantasy IX was like, he was like, oh, that's it, and then he went off to kind of make those, he's like, fuck you guys, I'm gonna go work for Xbox.
Made Lost Odyssey or something, right? Or Last Odyssey?
He made Lost Odyssey and Blue Dragon, and then it's like, sadly enough, it's like all the games he made, like past that point, it's like they weren't like there's nothing like, they weren't bad, but they just weren't like, I felt like he was missing that Squaresoft budget or something like that. Like there's just something like, or just even the Square team, like it's like all those games, you sort of play them and you just go, they could just be just a little bit better. Like a little bit better. Like that was kind of it. I remember there was one that he had for like Wii, and it had like a cool, like what the fuck was it called? Like I remember pre-ordering it and everything, and I was like, dude, I was so excited. It looked like fucking Final Fantasy VIII. Called like Last something or whatever. And I just remember kind of going like I just remember getting it and just being like, it just plays kind of like a crappy Devil May Cry knockoff, and yeah, it was kind of a bummer. It was a letdown. It was like, it should have been a really fucking cool game, and it was just okay.
Is it kind of like how the guy who made Mega Man went on to make Mighty Number 9, and everyone's like, oh, okay.
Well, Mighty Number 9 is just, all it has is it has one weird fucking feature that throws the whole balance off. That's all it is. The rest of the game is all totally fine. It's just that one fucking feature throws everything kind of off, that like all this Mega Man like fucking, muscle memory that you have is like, because I can't remember what it is, if you have to either slide through things or you have to dash through things. It has this weird thing that you have to do that you've never done before in a Mega Man game, and I guess they wanted to add an extra layer. But sometimes sometimes you add that extra layer and it almost makes things a little too complicated, There's
well, it's just weird because it was that like Mega Man but not Mega Man thing, and then it was on Kickstarter for like for a long ass time. Like it was a very simple side scroller, but then it just kept on getting pushed back, and then it came out. People were like, "This is it. This is what the big hold was all about."
Yeah, as I said, it's the dash thing, or I want to say it's a dash that you do, or a slide. I haven't played it in like 4 or 5 years or something like, or whatever. Maybe not that long, 3 or 4 years. But yeah, just one of those weird things. And every once in a while, you just get some games where it's just like, I remember those kind of like the Donkey Kong Returns one. It was like they just added too many like extra button presses in there, and it just almost like, just fucking back off. Just literally like Donkey Kong doesn't need to be more than like fucking 2 buttons. Like just saying, fucking he runs, he rolls, he jumps. Like fucking like that's it. Like once you start adding in all these other things in there, like it's almost like too convoluted. Like there's a game I was playing recently that was like that too. Like I just felt like it was just too much shit going on in like the buttons, and it was just like, you know what? No. Like, back the fuck off, make this game, like, playable. Like, if I'm kind of there going, like, trying to figure out the controls, like, that's not helping the cause,
Yeah.
But yeah. But beyond that, though, Final Fantasy, I would say avid children, not fucking watching avid children. Final Fantasy, The Spirits Within. It's there. It's a historical movie. Takes you back to when you were a wee young lad and you only dreamed of having a Final Fantasy movie. Back to those days. You don't know?
We'll get there again at some point. If you know, if we're in a world where Sonic the Hedgehog and Detective Pikachu both get good reviews and do decent in the box office, I think slowly we're gonna have movies like maybe another stab at a Final Fantasy movie. Maybe not like directly Final Fantasy VII, but one like it's a little bit of Final Fantasy IV, a little bit of 9, a little bit of 7. You know what I mean? Something like that.
Yeah, I think we kind of are, because even like I'll even add that Dragon Quest movie in that kind of category, because that's around the same time period too. So we might be in this like another wave, like whatever wave you want to call it, 3 or 4 of video game movies. But yeah, fun
like
times.
maybe it's that X-Men Spider-Man wave where it was kind of like no, they're not perfect, but they're steps in the right direction.
So Super Mario Brothers is like the Richard Donner Superman.
I mean, what else is there before that? I mean, technically, yeah. I love the Mario Brothers movie. You know what? I'm going to say it. I'm not going to say it's a better movie than Richard Donner Superman, but I probably have more sentimental attachment to that. So, you know, if someone else doesn't like it, I get why. But I love that movie, and not in a shitty, ironic way. I legitimately love that movie. So.
Oh, that's what I say. I fucking that movie's in my top 10 list, and I don't give a fuck. I just love that movie that much. Every time I watch it, it's just fucking magic from start to finish. But yeah,
Enjoy.
Final Fantasy Spirits of Finn. Go check that out. Go have a historical thing. Till then, go to oldmanorange.com for more podcasts, comics like Pizza Boys, animations, and all that other fun stuff. I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
And I'm Dunigan.
We'll see you some other time.
Later, folks.
Thanks again for listening to the Old Man Orange podcast. Sure, check out oldmanorange.com for more podcasts, cartoons, music, animation, and a whole lot more. We also have the Old Man Orange blog going with all kinds of fun stuff. If you easily want to support the show, use one of our Amazon links either on the website or in the description of the podcast below. Rate, review, and subscribe to the show either on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Newgrounds, or anywhere else that you seem to get this podcast from. Grab the sitcom-styled comic book Pizza Boys on either Comic Central, Comixology, or Amazon. Want more podcasts? Check out the Indie Comics Club over at Comic Central. I also got a workout website called Thor's Hidden Gym, filled with fitness tips and tricks, videos, and a whole lot more fun stuff in the calisthenics world. Talk to us on Twitter at Spencer S. Holmes and Dunigan Ryan. Like our Facebook pages of Old Man Orange Productions and Pizza Boys Comic. Thanks again. We're out of here.